The video didn't fade from memory overnight. It grew louder, spreading from phones to news stations, from town gossip to national headlines. By the end of the week, Dalton Briggs's name was synonymous with disgrace. He had become the face of arrogance and cruelty, and there was no uniform polished enough to hide it. The police department convened a formal hearing. Dalton arrived in full dress blues, trying to project authority, but the weight of cameras and public outrage pressed against him like a vice. His fellow officers avoided his eyes, and the chief's expression was as sharp as a blade. The footage played on a projector for the committee, the sneer, the splash of water, the stunned silence. The room itself seemed to recoil. When the lights came back on, Dalton tried to justify himself. The kid was disrespectful. I was teaching him discipline. People don't understand what it's like wearing this badge. But the committee wasn't swayed. A senior board member leaned forward, her voice steady. No, Officer Briggs. What people understand is dignity. And you stripped a young man of his in front of an entire community. That is not service. That is abuse. With a unanimous vote, Dalton was stripped of his badge and dismissed from the force. The announcement hit the news within minutes. Officer fired after viral video of abuse. At Miller's Diner, a cheer went up when the headline appeared on the TV mounted over the counter. Eli happened to be working that shift, and for the first time in days, the weight in his chest lifted. Customers shook his hand, left bigger tips, and reminded him that his courage, even in silence, had mattered. Mr. Jennings, who had carried his own guilt for not standing up more forcefully, pulled Eli aside. You showed more strength than I did that day. I won't forget it, and this diner will always stand with you. The community followed through. A scholarship fund was started in Eli's name, donations pouring in from strangers who had seen the video and wanted to help a boy who had endured humiliation with grace. Eli's mother wept when she learned he might now afford the college education they had feared was out of reach. As for Dalton, he left the precinct that final day without applause, without ceremony, just the hollow echo of boots on tile. The same arrogance that had fueled his career had now burned it to ashes. For him, the badge was gone forever, and with it, the illusion of untouchable power. Weeks later, Eli sat in his favorite booth at the diner during a quiet shift, staring out the window as sunlight spilled across the street. He touched the scholarship acceptance letter tucked in his pocket and allowed himself a rare smile. He hadn't asked to be a symbol. He had only wanted to do his job. But in standing tall under humiliation, he had reminded an entire town and beyond of a simple truth. Respect is not earned by force. It is deserved by every human being. And that truth, once captured on camera, could never be poured out or silenced again. The afternoon sun reflected off the clear water of the community pool, casting ripples of light across the tiles. It was one of those rare summer days when everything seemed calm. Birds chirped lazily in the trees, the faint hum of lawnmowers buzzed in the distance, and children's laughter echoed faintly from nearby houses. For Angela Carter, the pool was more than just a place to cool off. It was a space she had worked hard to enjoy, a slice of peace she had earned after years of dedication to her career and to her family. She sat comfortably in a lounge chair, sunglasses perched on her face, a novel resting on her lap. A tall glass of iced tea sweated beads of condensation onto the small table beside her. Angela was no stranger to hard work. She had built her life through determination and sacrifice, earning not only the home she now lived in but also the respect of her community, or so she believed. But on that warm afternoon, her sense of belonging was about to be challenged in the most humiliating way. The squeal of tires on asphalt broke the calm. 2 patrol cars rolled up to the edge of the gated community, their presence loud and commanding. Neighbors peered through blinds and half-closed doors as 2 uniformed officers stepped out, their radios crackling at their shoulders. Officer Matthews, broad-shouldered and brash, scanned the poolside with narrowed eyes. His partner, Officer Simmons, followed, less aggressive but equally watchful. They approached Angela with the clipped steps of men already convinced they were in the right. "Ma'am," Matthews barked, his voice carrying across the water. "We've had reports of someone trespassing here." Care to explain why you're at this pool? Angela lowered her sunglasses, confusion furrowing her brow. Excuse me? I live here. This is my pool. Matthews crossed his arms, unimpressed. Funny, because the caller said someone who didn't look like they belonged was lounging by the water. That someone sounds a lot like you. The words hit with a sting sharper than the summer heat. Angela sat up straighter, closing her book. I assure you, officer, I live here. My house is just beyond that gate. She pointed calmly, refusing to let indignation show in her tone. But Simmons chimed in, suspicion dripping from his words. Got any proof of that, ma'am? ID? Keycard. Angela exhaled slowly, the peace of her afternoon evaporating. Around them, whispers began to stir as neighbors crept closer, curious to see what was unfolding. Some pretended to water their lawns, others peeked from balconies. To them, it looked like drama. To Angela, it was humiliation. The pool, once her place of refuge, now felt like a stage where she was being forced to defend her very right to exist. And though she didn't know it yet, this confrontation would unravel not only the officer's prejudice but the very system that empowered them to act this way. Angela rose slowly from her lounge chair, her composure intact though a storm brewed behind her calm expression. She reached for her bag, pulling out her wallet, but the act only seemed to embolden Officer Matthews. Careful with your hands, he snapped, one palm hovering near the holster at his hip. His voice was sharp enough to cut through the humid summer air. Angela froze mid-motion, holding her wallet clearly in view. It's just my ID, she said evenly, her voice measured. You asked for proof. I'm giving it to you. Simmons stepped closer, circling her like she was already guilty of something. Strange, isn't it? He muttered. You say you live here, but we don't see you around. Neighbors don't seem to know you. From across the fence, Mrs. Harlow, an older resident known for nosy habits, chimed in loudly. I've never seen her before. She doesn't belong here. Angela clenched her jaw but kept her tone firm. I've lived here for 2 years. Maybe you should pay more attention before making accusations. She handed her driver's license to Matthews, who took it with exaggerated suspicion, as if expecting it to reveal a forgery. He squinted at the card, then at her, as though the words printed there couldn't possibly match the woman standing before him. Could be fake, he said finally, tossing the ID back at her with casual disrespect. Gasps rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. Some neighbors whispered uneasily, others watched silently, their faces unreadable. Angela felt the heat rising in her chest, not from the sun, but from the indignity of being treated as an intruder in her own community. Why don't you step away from the pool? Simmons suggested coldly. We can sort this out at the station. If you're telling the truth, you'll be free to go. Angela's eyes narrowed. You're asking me to leave my own property because someone assumed I don't belong here? No, I'm not going anywhere. Matthews smirked, leaning closer, his tone mocking. Lady, you're making this harder than it has to be. People who don't cooperate usually have something to hide. At that, Angela finally felt her patience splinter. She straightened her posture, her voice ringing with authority. What I'm hiding is a quiet afternoon ruined by your prejudice. I have nothing to prove to you. You've overstepped. The crowd stirred again. A few younger neighbors pulled out their phones, recording the interaction. Matthews noticed but pretended not to care, puffing his chest as though the cameras only fueled his performance. Last chance, he barked. Step away, or we'll have to remove you by force. Angela met his stare without flinching. Touch me, and you'll regret it. Her words, steady and unshaken, carried more weight than Matthews anticipated. For though they thought they had cornered her, Angela was about to turn the tables in a way neither officer nor the onlookers could have imagined. The silence that followed Angela's warning was heavy, thick enough to make even the murmurs of the crowd die down. Matthews chuckled, though the sound was forced. Big talk, he sneered. From someone who can't even prove she belongs here. Angela slipped her license back into her wallet, then reached deeper into her bag. This time, She moved with slow, deliberate precision, her eyes never leaving the officers. From the side, Simmons stiffened, as if bracing for confrontation. But what she pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was a slim leather case, worn at the edges from years of use. She flipped it open and held it high enough for the bystanders and the officers to see. The late afternoon sun gleamed off the gold badge inside. Gasps swept across the crowd. Even the phones recording the incident caught the sharp glint of authority. Angela's voice cut through the stunned silence like steel. "My name is Angela Carter, federal civil rights attorney. I don't just live here. I fight cases against officers exactly like you. And believe me when I say, this confrontation is going to be your worst mistake." Matthews's smirk faltered, his jaw slackening for the first time since he'd strutted onto the scene. Simmons blinked hard, his face paling as the weight of her words sank in. Around them, the crowd erupted in whispers, some neighbors nodding in vindication, others shamefaced for having doubted her. Angela took a step forward, her presence commanding. "You accused me of trespassing in my own neighborhood. You treated me like a criminal without cause. And you did it in front of witnesses and cameras. Do you have any idea what kind of case this makes?" The officer's earlier bravado evaporated, replaced by stammering. We were just responding to a call." Matthews tried, his voice cracking under the pressure. "No," Angela interrupted, her tone sharp as glass. "You weren't just responding. You escalated. You ignored my identification. You mocked me. And then you threatened to use force against me for doing nothing more than enjoying my afternoon." The neighbors with their phones in hand captured every second, their cameras now angled not at her but at the officers shrinking beneath her gaze. Simmons shifted uncomfortably, muttering, "Maybe we should de-escalate." Angela closed her badge with a snap that echoed louder than their threats had minutes ago. "De-escalation would have been listening the first time I said I live here. Instead, you chose intimidation." The humiliation now clung not to Angela but to the officers. The crowd's murmurs grew into open condemnation, voices rising with words like unbelievable and disgrace. The fragile authority Matthews had tried to wield had shattered, replaced with Angela's undeniable truth. For the first time that afternoon, the pool area no longer felt like a stage of shame. It was a courtroom, and Angela Carter was both witness and prosecutor. And the verdict, though not yet spoken, was already clear. The tension around the pool broke like a dam. Neighbors who had once whispered now spoke openly, some even applauding Angela's composure. Phones stayed raised, ensuring every second of the officer's humiliation was captured. For the first time that afternoon, Angela allowed herself a small, calm smile. She wasn't just defending herself. She was exposing something bigger. Matthews cleared his throat, fumbling for dignity that had long since evaporated. "Ma'am, perhaps we misread the situation." His words were brittle, unconvincing. Angela raised an eyebrow. "Misread?" she repeated, her tone sharp enough to cut the humid air. "You didn't misread anything. You saw a black woman by a pool and assumed she didn't belong. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern." The crowd nodded, some murmuring in agreement. A young mother whispered, "She's right," loud enough for the officers to hear. Simmons shifted uneasily, his hand fidgeting near his belt, but he no longer looked authoritative. He looked cornered. Angela continued, her voice steady and powerful. "You came here to humiliate me. Instead, you've humiliated yourselves and your department. And believe me, this will not end with an apology. There will be accountability." Her words carried the weight of promise. Matthews opened his mouth to argue, but the flashing red light on a bystander's phone camera silenced him. Anything he said now would be replayed, dissected, and condemned online within minutes. He knew it. By the next morning, the video had already gone viral. Headlines screamed across social media. "Cops harass black woman at her own pool. She turns out to be civil rights attorney." Millions watched the footage, anger spilling into comment sections, calling for the officer's suspension. The police chief held a press conference 2 days later, the weight of public outrage heavy on his shoulders. His words were clipped, formal, and grim. Effective immediately, Officer Matthews is suspended without pay pending investigation. Officer Simmons has been placed on administrative leave. The announcement was met with cheers across the neighborhood, and relief from Angela, who stood silently at the back of the press gathering. She hadn't needed vengeance. She had needed truth, and truth had prevailed. Back at the pool the following weekend, Angela reclined once again in her chair, book in hand, iced tea by her side. The water sparkled as if the incident had never happened. But the community around her felt different. Neighbors greeted her with warmth, some even apologizing for their silence. The air buzzed not with suspicion but with respect. Angela, however, knew this was more than a personal victory. It was a reminder, a warning even, that systems of power cannot go unchallenged. Her presence by the pool had sparked a reckoning. She took a slow sip of her drink, gazing at the reflection of the sun on the water. Justice, she thought, wasn't just about punishment. It was about change. And that afternoon, under the same sun that had once witnessed her humiliation, Angela Carter claimed not only her place by the pool but also the undeniable truth. Respect is not optional. It is a right.